River, I think that it is finally about time that we start answering some of these questions that we keep getting time and time again. And so, on that note, what I'd really love to do, and this episode in particular, is just to take a little bit of a deep dive into our branding process. You know, it's a question, as I say, it's a question that we seem to get time and time again. And again, the thing with branding is, and obviously branding is a big part about what we do at Yugen. But the thing is, with these creative kind of processes that certainly that I've found, at least anyway, is that there's so many different ways of doing things. And essentially, you know, we know that at the core of what we do, obviously it all comes down to strategy and empathy and understanding all of the data before we dive into anything, right? But the thing is, it's you know, a branding process is so, I would say, subjective that until you really get a good kind of inside look into what that process looks like, man, I can really see why some people just maybe don't grasp it, or they can't quite understand A, you know, what it is, and B, the importance of it. So how about we just, you know, over the next kind of 30 minutes or so, we just slowly unpack what it looks like to work with Yugen, for example, on a branding project, and particularly talking about our strategy side of that process. What do you think? How's that sound?
Sounds good. So to be clear, we're talking a little bit more than just a logo design, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And again, that's a common misconception. You see it time and time again. Those emails come through to the inbox. Hey, I'm looking for a logo. I'm looking for this, and it's like, okay, let's take a step back. Okay, let's explain exactly what it is that we do and how we can help you move that needle and achieve those goals, right? So
let's go. Let's jump in.
Let's just go with a bit of a, yeah, absolutely. Let's just go with a super high level view about what that identity process looks like. So first of all, obviously, we have the strategy process, and that's really a opportunity for us to sit down with the client and start to unpack all of the fundamentals that are going to go into what eventually will be a brand identity. Now, obviously, a huge kind of thing that, you know, we hear this time and time again. Well, a brand, you know, it takes years to create and leverage a brand, right? And of course, the answer to that is yes. River, speak to that a little bit. First of all, let's just clear that up. First of all,
of course, yeah. So usually someone will come to us. They want a logo design. They want a brand identity, and we don't do any of that until we've done what's called brand strategy. So that is essentially, if you think about what strategy is, it's essentially a plan of action to get to a desired place. So when you put brand strategy together, it's essentially a plan of action to get your brand from where it is currently to where you want it to be. And it would include things like reaching your business goals, perception from your audience, and all those good things, really. So yeah, that's essentially what brand strategy is. Like, if you weren't to do that and you were to flip it on its head, then essentially you are developing a visual identity with no plan to meet business objectives. There's no kind of core foundation or understanding there. There's no alignment within your team, and it's kind of like an empty shell that you're creating, a bit of a visual facade, if you will.
Right.
So
it's,
yeah,
it's
brand
hollow,
strategy.
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's hollow. Brand strategy dives into, you know, why are you doing this? What's your purpose beyond financial gain? Going into all this good stuff. Should we dive into a bit more what that includes, so we could paint a bit more of a picture here?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, let me just kind of what I want to do is outline these high level steps, right? So first of all is the strategy, and that's what we're going to talk about here. Once we've done that strategy process and we've got that alignment with the client, it's then down to the stylescaping process, which is a topic for a whole nother conversation. After that, we go into design ideation, which is like that's the good stuff, right? That's the kind of exciting. Let's get our hands dirty. Let's start creating, right? From then, we then create our assets and our collateral designs. So whether it's like social posts or business cards, stationery, all of that kind of good stuff that will go with the identity. And then it's things like guidelines, and then finally handover. So, but I just want to talk to strategy real quick before we actually dive into to kind of look at what that looks like. And it's really important, like, really, that's everything that we do, you know, across all of the different services that we provide. To truly, again, we're a value-based company, right? The only time we work with someone is if we truly feel that we can provide value and move the needle, right? I really think that it's so important to say that we can't do any of our job really until we have the opportunity to sit down and go through that strategy process. You're essentially, you're pissing in the wind, right? Or maybe there's another kind of podcast friendly term for that. You're punching in the dark, right? You go to archery, you want to hit a target, right? And imagine just, first of all, that first time you go in there and you've got someone there and they help explain, the bow and the technique and what you want to do, like where you want to aim, right, to get onto that target. Now reverse that and imagine just going in there, flipping off the light switch and picking up your bow and just shooting straight downfield, right? You might get lucky, you might get a hit, but really, you need to kind of take a step back and understand what it is that we're trying to achieve here, so that there's measurable metrics, right, that we can kind of compare against. So, strategy. Let's jump straight in. River, tell me, high level, what does our strategy workshop look like? What would it work like if I was, let's just say I'm a fresh new client, I've no idea what it's like to work with River, this branding wizard. Sit me down. What does that look like?
I'm not sure I'm a wizard, but yeah, let me break down the process. I think it comes down to three main groups. So there's the brand core. This is the heart of your brand. And this is where we're getting into things such as your purpose, your vision, values, mission. What is it that you want to happen in the world, your impact. After that, it's number 2, which is your positioning. So that would be things such as your audience, diving into who your ideal audience is, what the market landscape looks like and where you fit in, how you can differentiate. And then after that, it would be brand perception is the final step, which is your personality, tone of voice, visual language, and how you would the different kind of words that you want associated with your brand. They're the three core pillars of what makes up our brand strategy workshops. How we deliver those is essentially mostly virtual, right? We never really meet with these people, unfortunately, face to face. Since COVID, we haven't really got out of that. But the plus side though is that we can pretty much do this from anywhere in the world. We're working with quite a few people all over at the moment, right? Israel.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Globe trotting, mate, from the comfort of our own homes. So
that's it.
It's very much a conversational exercise, isn't it? This is just a time for us to sit down and really just unpack all these things that the client may not even understand the importance of some of the words that are coming out of their mouths, right? But we're just there constantly recording away all of these words that they use. We capture all of that information, right? So that after that session, we can take time to go away, synthesize all of that data and create, basically, a bit of a roadmap. So first of all, obviously the first thing that we do is, really we want to capture those high level business goals, right? Why is it important for us to sit down and speak to the client and before we do anything, discuss those high level business goals? Why is that important?
So we want to understand why we're even here. Why are we doing this brand exercise or this engagement? Like, we want to know what impact you want first and what problems you're experiencing. We want to know where it's coming from and what the driver is here. And by understanding that, we can kind of get a handle on, is it worth even doing this project in the first place? Is it going to help you get to where you want to be? And if we've already established that point and we're doing this brand strategy, then of course we can figure out, what goals are we trying to reach through this effort that we're trying to do together. Yeah,
and again, a lot of the time, I think it helps us kind of further down the line as well, right? So if there's an engagement that goes way past the a brand identity phase, right? It's really the high level business goals is going to carry through essentially for all of those engagements, right? It enables us to really understand, okay, what are we trying to do here? And if it does go past that brand phase, we've got that background knowledge, right, of how we can really make an impact on other projects like user experience design or web flow development, whatever that might look like, right?
Yeah. at the end of the day, we want to move the needle for the business, right? And one of the ways we can do that is through brand strategy that then feeds into everything else thereafter. This is your foundation. After that, you can go into brand identity design, we can go into web design, we can go into product and UX. But the brand strategy is, it just lays those foundations, we gain understanding, and by going through those business goals at first, we can see how this fits into the ecosystem of what it is we're all collectively coming together to do.
We have a bit of a mantra here, don't we? In that, all great things in life start with a conversation. And I think that that's so pivotal to this process, is that it's just a way for us to talk and uncover opportunities, roadblocks, etc., and how we get to that end goal. So you mentioned a foundation. I think that kind of leads into this brand core that you mentioned, right? So jump in a little bit with this brand core. What's the benefit to understanding those mission, vision, purpose? I'm sure a lot of people listening may have heard mission, vision, purpose all the time. Why do we do this? Why is that important?
So the brand core is diving into the purpose. This is like one of the main questions that I like to answer here is, why do you exist beyond financial gain? Like, it's so easy to say, oh, well, I set up the company just to gain just for financial benefits, right? But one of the things, obviously, we work primarily with climate tech startups. The great thing about that is they very rarely say we came into this for financial gain. They came into this oftentimes to make a difference, change the world, change the future, have some kind of huge impact here. And by diving into all of these things, right, at the end of the brand strategy, we end up having a roadmap. This is like a document that has everything kind of concisely put in a document, right? So whenever you have a team and you want to gather everyone and have everyone aligned, right, we can have them all aligned to the same mission. They all know why we're doing this and what we stand for and what our beliefs are, what our values are. And they're the kind of things they're those invisible traits that no one actually sees, but things you act by, things you live by, and you practice through your behavior that do transpire to your target audience. They influence how you're perceived, and they get people on board and rally behind you, all for this one goal, right? This one mission.
Yeah, and I think again, like in our industry, or at least our, the niche that we support, it's very much emotionally driven. A lot of these factors are emotional, and I think that it's being able to tap into those emotional factors of your core values and your beliefs, right, and understanding how we can best convey that to your target audience, so that there's full, every chance of getting that full resonation in with your identity, right, so that you can really kind of have that connection with your audience. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting then, and I think that would then lead into essentially like the brand positioning aspect, right? So this is where we talk a little bit more about the finer details, right? We go into a lot of the market landscape, again, your target audience in the form of user or customer personas and stuff like that. Talk to me a little bit about that, man.
Yeah, so brand positioning, we have audience, we have market, we have user personas. Before we can get to any design work, we need to know who we're designing for. So what we're going to do first is we're going to work with the client through this workshop, and we're going to gather their thoughts and their perception of who their audience is. Who is their ideal audience or audiences? How can we categorize those? What drives them? What are their frustrations? What are their challenges? What do they aspire to be like or to achieve? And by doing that, what you can do is you can gain alignment and gain clarity on who they are, and kind of speak to them and communicate them and position your brand in a way that resonates with them. So that's audience. As we go into market, what we're doing here is looking at kind of the landscape, if you will. So your vertical, your competitors. So we might run a little bit of a competitive analysis here to see how you are going to position yourself that differentiates from others that are in the space. What can you do that others aren't doing? What can you learn from those that are doing things good? So the strengths of your competitors, and what are their weaknesses? Where is their opportunity? how can we deliver a better customer service? How can we interact with our audience and resonate them on a level that our competitors are not? So it's where do you fit in terms of a niche, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And again, you mentioned differentiation. How you differentiate, and I think that that's super important to highlight. Is that everything that we do as part of this process is so that you can essentially differentiate from the competition. You can stand alone and be openly different to others. Right. You don't want to be able to be compared. It's like comparing apples to oranges, right? You want to be able to differentiate, and again, that speaks to the 3Ps approach that we talk about all the time, which again we'll go into in another episode. But the 3Ps essentially is the different facets of design that we believe by taking those necessary measures for your position, number one, product, number two, and your pitch, number three. Those are all key ways on how you can differentiate and make a difference in your respective space. So I think that's really important to note as well. So, all right, River, you spoke to me about the brand core. You spoke to me about brand positioning. Talk to me now about brand perception. You mentioned brand perception, which is all about really, how you come across to other people, right?
Yeah, so we understand now why you do this. What's your purpose? What's your mission? What is the impact you want to make in the world? We then understand the kind of drivers of your audience, what they kind of resonate with, what makes them tick. We also understand where you fit in the market. So brand perception is all about using those insights to feed, okay, well, what's our personality like? How do we behave, and what characteristics are associated with our brand? So that might be things such as tone of voice, the language we use, the attitude that comes across in how we act. And this is also visual language as well. So these are very much the visible traits. At the brand core, you've got those invisible ones. They're kind of like below the surface of this iceberg. And then this is the tip of the iceberg here. This is the front facing, what people see, and it taps into those sensory things. Yeah.
So, man, I tell you what, it's as we're going through talk about all these things, it's real easy to see, wow, okay, yeah, this isn't just designing a logo, right? So I'm hoping those people that are listening,
it's a deep
thinking,
dive.
oh, yeah, I need a logo. Like, you're really, if you go out there to find the logo, and trust me, you will find those people that will design you a logo, and they'll do it probably within the day, and they'll do it for fairly let's just say fairly cheap. Let's not beat around the bush there. But we're really starting to see a pattern here about how, okay, there's a lot of strategy, a lot of core fundamentals that goes into how we essentially get to that end goal. So you mentioned to me about you've mentioned a few times these invisible traits and those visible traits. So, and I know here that there's a certain exercise that we go through that really kind of helps us a kind of make heads and tails of all that kind of stuff. So what I want to do now really is, there's several exercises, right, that we may engage with to essentially start to unpack all these things, right? We spoke about these different categories and what we're trying to get here, but I want to talk a little bit about the how, right? Because I think it's really important that we start to explain some of the methods of how we do this, because there may be people listening, and there are certainly some DIY approaches that you can do to start to unpack some of this stuff. Let's just go through a few exercises that we might undertake for a particular project or a client, and explain a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah. So really quickly as well, we tend to do this in a Fig Jam session. So our virtual workshops are in a Fig Jam. We invite the client on. There could be 1, 2, or even 3 people that get involved. Matthew and I jump on too, and we're all kind of there working together. So we basically have this file that works from left to right with all these different sections that consist of various exercises that we can do that are contextual or relevant to the specific job to hand. We have a load of post-it notes that we can kind of fill in and really quickly record ideas So then we can like just keep the conversation flowing and keep the ideas just kind of stacking on top of each other. So yeah, some of those things will include user personas. So user personas fits into the audience section of the three kind of pillars, which goes in brand positioning. Matthew, do you want to elaborate more on user personas, because I know you are the UX guy here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, 100%. And it's the thing with personas, some people get it and some people just don't, right? We've had those workshops with clients that, you know, a lot of the time, especially if there's multiple, you know, if there's 2 or 3, it becomes a bit of an icebreaker exercise, right? Everyone can start to get involved. And essentially, just to kind of, you know, take it back to the basics here, a user persona or a customer persona is really, we're creating a pseudo personality here that really personifies our target audience, right? So it's a fictional character, and the reason why we do this is because, you know, we don't want to have any kind of biases about who we are targeting, right? So it's a fictional persona, but it's based on real, tangible insights. And what we do, we give them a name, we give them an age range. You know, it's all of these kind of demographics, their personality, their drivers, their pain points, all of this kind of stuff we collate. And what it does, it represents our audience, right? And we may do 2, sometimes we'll do 3. We don't really recommend that we do more than that. But really, it forms a basis of every design decision that we make must be validated and satisfies that user persona. So any decision we will go through in the visual ideation stage, we'll say, okay, does this satisfy Joe? Does this satisfy Susan, for example? And we'll go through, and if it doesn't, we can it. It's not we're not interested in it. And what it does, it keeps us grounded in our approach and makes sure that everything that we do is relevant to the strategy that we've already undertaken, right? Sometimes these processes can last, you know, several weeks, several months even, and it's easy to kind of lose track of, you know, who we are designing for. So by having that representation, it means that there's always something to go back to, and it really it makes life so much easier for us in the future, because all we say is, does it satisfy this person? No? Okay, we're not interested in it. Let's put a pin in it and we can come back to it another time. But for now, that's not our focus. So that's really why we go through a user or a customer persona.
Yeah, exactly. And when you get to the design work after we've done the brand strategy, again, it's like your compass to kind of make decisions. Sometimes with design, it gets a little bit hazy. We might ask the question like, you know, do you like this brand identity proposal that we've put together, or this stylescape? And sometimes you're kind of just unsure. So all you need to do is revert back. Does it resonate with so-and-so? And if it does, then it kind of just helps to make those decisions and guide you in your decision-making process. Cool. Yeah. So let me list a few more then. So we have the competitor analysis. So this is where we're going to look into who would your ideal customers or your ideal audience consider using as an alternative to yourself? Who else would they buy from? And what we're going to do here is we're going to have an X and Y axis that crosses over, and we're going to have kind of some different characteristics that can be on the left, right, top and bottom. So that might be things such as exclusivity versus something that's super accessible. And then you might have what else could we have here? We could have like price point as well.
Investment, high investment. So it could be
low investment, high investment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of come up with these on the fly, depending on who we're talking with and what makes sense to do. And oftentimes as well, we do a personality pyramid where we have all these different kind of spectrums of different adjectives on each side. And oftentimes 2 of those make sense to use on these axes. And basically from there, after we've chosen what words we're going to use, we're then plotting these different competitors on this kind of matrix to see where do most of them fall, where is that opportunity, and where do we fit into this.
I think that a lot of the time it really helps the client as well, right? They may have a good idea in their head. They say, yeah, I can list 5 or 10 competitors. But having that kind of visual exercise where we actually plot them on those various axes, for example, they can start to see where they fall, right, where they fit within that ecosystem. And again, it enables us to make sure that we position them, the client, in a way that means that they will, be able to leverage that differentiation to get that business and ultimately, make more money, right?
It's one of my favorite byproducts of brand strategy. Like, we're using it for ourselves, we're using it to help the client to gain something, that a brand that has substance, right? But at the same time, they're gaining so much clarity around their business and what they stand for, and just their audience, the competitors as well. It's so useful. Like, usually they know all this stuff, it's all in their head, but actually taking the time to put it down and just discuss it with someone else, like an outside perspective, is so useful to them. And that's obviously what, like, the kind of feedback that we get.
It's definitely an underappreciated kind of process that I think it's not until you go through that process that people, kind of truly realize, wow, okay, yeah, that's been a real kind of difference maker in this entire process. And again, it allows them to have that additional clarity going forward, right? Once we're separated from that process, they've got their incredible new brand, visual brand identity. Once we're separated from that process, they've got all of this, all of these kind of findings presented to them so that they can use that in every other aspect of their business. Okay, so let's just touch on one other of these exercises, I think. For example, let's talk about the personality spectrum. Again, that kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with, some of the keywords that we like to pick out as well. So it might be, what adjectives do you want associated with your brand, right? And sometimes we'll provide some kind of insights as to what these words could be. Talk about that a little bit, and then about the spectrum, about how we essentially we go from one end of the spectrum to the other, and we say, pinpoint on this spectrum where you think you are currently, and where you want to get with this new brand.
Yeah, sure. So we have a series of sliders, maybe 4 to 6. We have an adjective on each side, and it's two ends of the spectrum. So it might be that and this is mostly linked with how you speak, so tone of voice, and also maybe like kind of behavior too. But it's things such as, do you speak as though you are a friend or an authority? Are you fun and humorous, or are you serious? Are you luxury, or are you mass market, mass appeal? And basically this just helps us to see where they are currently at as a brand, if it's a rebrand, and then where they aspire to be. So we could just plot where those two things and have a good feel here of, okay, well, where they're at the moment, their existing brand, they associate as being here. We need to use this information, use their current brand, and make sure we're on this side of the spectrum, more towards where they aspire to be.
Right. So that speaks to the brand perception then, right, about that personality, and maybe that will help feed into the tone of voice, right? So we understand what type of language we use, how we speak as as a brand, how we speak to our audience, right? That's where that's really unpacked, yeah.
Yeah, when you come into your taglines, your slogans, and general copywriting too, when you're working with a copywriter, that all comes into play then, and is super helpful to pass on to those people.
Cool. So that's really just, a few examples of these exercises about, which is like the how we get to this type of stuff. Again, we have a range of exercises, and actually, here's a little call to action plug for everybody. You can head over to our website, where we do have some kind of DIY exercises there for things like your user personas and stuff like that. There are some kind of DIY approaches that you can do here, that you can do with your team, with your co-founders, etc., to kind of really start to unpick this type of stuff. But really, what we do, everything is very much in these sessions. It's quick and dirty, right? River, you mentioned about how we use post-its. Post-its are so useful to just getting quick notes down. And
no
again,
thrills.
when you're in that, yeah, exactly. And when you're in that kind of flow of conversation, we're both there constantly just writing down key phrases, keywords that have been said that may not have even been picked up, right? But we collect that in a very quick and dirty way. Obviously, the exercises help us frame some of those. So, like the pyramid, for example, we still utilize these post-its, but we have a bit of a framework to go on, right? So that's why we kind of have these exercises. And again, they change from client to client. Sometimes, typically we can get this type of session done in maybe an hour. Obviously, the longer that we can do, we can have more of these exercises and get that deeper insight. But really, if we've got half an hour, we can kind of utilize some of the other approaches and some different exercises to really get the core information that we need, so that we have all of the intel we need before we get to that really exciting hands-on work, right? So okay, cool. So I think that really summarizes, I would say, the strategy workshop process, right? So again, that's really that initial step to the branding process, guys. And it's, you've got that strategy session, and once we do that, the deliverable, right? What's the outcome? What happens from that session? And that all basically comes down to a brand roadmap. So River, it's super concise, isn't it? It's usually we try and get this done in like a one-pager.
Yeah, I've seen, usually it's a page for kind of each section. So when we're talking about the brand core, brand positioning, and brand perception, maybe a page for each one of those. I've seen some companies do 40-page brand roadmaps. I don't think that's usable, and no one wants to read that.
Right, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It helps keep us focused, and again, everything is, we've already collated that information, we've already done the hard work, right? We just need to put it down on paper, so that there's that alignment between us and the client, so that, like I said, we can really kind of get our hands dirty there. So so from that, as I said at the start, just to kind of summarize them before we sign off here. So at the end of that strategy session, we've got that roadmap. Everybody's now aligned, and then that's when we go into our stylescaping process. We're not going to jump into that here, but really I just wanted to kind of finish this process so you can see what that process looks like from start to finish. So after the strategy, it's the stylescaping. From the stylescaping, it's the design ideation. And again, we look to those insights that we've learned, and we ask ourselves, does this satisfy all of this intel? If it does, it goes into the ideation, and we get really creative. If it doesn't, we're not interested. After that, once we have that sign off of the visual brand, we then can create things like assets and all the collateral design, maybe the social post, all of the stationery design, you name it. We go ahead and do that. And then after that process, it's brand guidelines, right? So it's like, okay, you've held our hand throughout this process. Now you're going to be gone from our lives. We just want a nice document that summarizes, so that we know how to leverage and utilize the brand that you've created so far. And again, that's a topic for another conversation. And then it's handover, right? So we go through that QA, we go through that quality assurance, we'll go through some lessons learned, perhaps. We'll get that feedback, we'll get those testimonials, and then essentially the client is away with their brand new brand identity that really, is the, again, we talked about the 3 Ps briefly. That there is really going to set you up for success as far as your position is concerned. And then those other areas, your product and your pitch, that you can really utilize that new brand identity to essentially tie everything together to really dominate in your space, right? Is there anything else you wanted to add there, River, before we sign off here?
No, I think you nailed it there. One more thing, just that we supplement the workshop with our own primary and secondary research too. And that might involve like kind of speaking with focus groups, speaking with clients, customers, or just doing kind of research as well. So we go away and do our own due diligence just to validate everything that we gather in the session rings true with what we find too.
That's a great point. River, thank you very much for your time. It's great to talk to you as always and unpack all of this good stuff about branding. Guys, that was a brief inside look as to our branding process. We hope you found it useful. Check us out over on LinkedIn. You've got our website as well, yugenagency.co. And guys, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Peace.